I'm Claudius Deploy, co-founder of Pachachaterrae. What does Pachachaterrae do? We're the first company that can do soil carbon measurement on a large scale and in an economically feasible manner. We're the largest company in North America that can do this. Why is this significant? In Alberta alone, there are about 20 million hectares of regenerative and ranch land that's available for soil carbon sequestration. This could translate to approximately 60 million tons of CO2 equivalent that gets sequestered every year, and this would translate roughly into about $63 million per year in revenue to both the producers and to Pachachaterrae, which will be shared. The product is threefold. First and foremost, what we do is we help the producers generate, and then we aggregate and sell the carbon offsets on the carbon market. And this is by far the biggest part of our business. The second part of the business is very unique consulting in that we focus on soil health and soil microbiology to work with the producers in conjunction to improve regenerative agriculture and the soil's ability to sequester carbon, thereby increasing the number of carbon offsets being created. The third part, and the software that keeps all of this together, is we're building machine learning software called Pachachaterrae that on the back end will be the basis for our soil data analysis and to bring further science to the producers, but also on the front end to be a practical management tool to the producers that they can use on the farm to see what's going on in terms of moisture and production and carbon levels. What exactly is the problem? Alberta by far is the biggest greenhouse gases in the country. In 2016, we emitted about 274 million tons of CO2 into the air. There's a dramatic need for more carbon offsets in Alberta, but also in Canada as a whole. Over the past few years, on average, only about 10% of the need for carbon offsets have been met by carbon offsets in the market. But we don't have mechanisms whereby we can create large enough offsets to be purchased by the offsetters. Now, what's the solution? Ranch lands is the biggest source of carbon offsets and carbon sequestration on the planet. The planet was designed, in fact, in such a way that excess carbon in the atmosphere would be drawn down by healthy plants and pumped into healthy soil. So, in rough terms, healthy soil can sequester between 1 and 9 tons of CO2 equivalent per year per hectare. And if you add this up, it's massive amounts of carbon that can be sequestered. So what we came up is brand new technology whereby we bring the cost of the soil organic carbon measurement down dramatically by a factor of more than 10. This creates the opportunity for us to develop new carbon offset protocols on carbon markets whereby we can now aggregate these offsets on behalf of the producers and go sell it to emitters on the market. What does this translate to? A dramatically and a significant new revenue stream for the producers, specifically in regenerative agriculture, which at this point is still somewhat economically challenged because it's so new. On top of it all, there's a tremendous social impact in all of this as well. Now, what have we done to date? And what you see on the slide is really our production chain, if you will, and all the different components that we've done. We have tremendous engagement from producers and industry associations. For example, all of the forage and grazing associations in the country are in talks with us to help us and work in partnership with us to reach out to the producers and to assist in helping them to generate more of these carbon offsets. We have engaged the top firm, predictive land mapping firm that works with machine learning and AI in the Netherlands to help us build the stratification maps that we would roll out on the land that's being measured. We have the field sampling crews in place that can go out even this summer and do the field sampling, and they would draw a core of 1 meter deep, probably times about 60 per measurement area. We have the labs ready for the lab analysis, because the cores will be sent to the laboratory to be tested for not only carbon, but a whole bunch of other nutrients, as well as we're mapping the soil microbiology in the soil in terms of genomics while we're doing this. In all of this, and as I mentioned, the consulting is a really, really important part of our outreach and our continued partnership with the producers, and we're already in the field consulting with producers as we speak. And then, very excitingly, in carbon markets, you cannot generate carbon offsets unless it's done in terms of or under an accepted carbon offset protocol. We have filed, and we're in the process of developing a carbon offset protocol with the Alberta government. We are in preliminary talks with the governments of Quebec, Nova Scotia, as well as Saskatchewan to actually roll out these protocols in those provinces as well. Very excitingly, we're also doing the development of a protocol on an international market, on the Climate Action Reserve out of California. And once that is through the process, technically speaking, we can actually bring projects from everywhere in the world under this protocol. Our immediate focus, and we are talking to the officials in Mexico, is to actually roll this out in the ranching community in Mexico. Okay, so the business model, as I mentioned, three main portions to that, of which the main one is the offset aggregation. We generate and we work in partnership with the producers to generate the offset, to aggregate this, and to sell it on carbon markets. Part of our IP strategy is to reach into as many different markets as we can as quickly as possible. And we get certain economies of scale by doing by doubling up on the various protocol developments that we're doing, because essentially all the science to the protocol is pretty much the same wherever in the world you go. We're estimating this to be about 80% of our revenue over time. And then the research and consulting, and that's going to be a continuous feedback loop, in that we would probably be the owners of the biggest database of soil data in the world very quickly, and that allows us to do continuous research on the soil data and to come up with new information that we can feed back to the producers. And the consulting is on a straightforward consulting revenue model. Going back one step, the offset aggregation, it's pretty much standard in offset aggregation that the aggregator, which would be Pachachaterrae, would keep about 30% of the profits, and 70% of the profits would go to the producers. So, moving on. Pachachaterrae, as I mentioned, the machine learning software basis that we're in the process of building, that's going to be a SaaS model, and this will work in conjunction with the consulting in order to provide that management to the producers. Other potential revenue, quite frankly, that we've not really looked at yet in depth is corporate interests such as insurance companies, municipalities, various levels of government would be interested in the data, which would certainly have tremendous value for us. Quick overview of the market. There's a lot going on this slide. However, in very broad strokes, between Alberta and BC, we have about 20 million hectares that's available for carbon offset generation. Canada-wide, 50 million. In the US, 314 million. In 2021, we expect to see the first carbon offsets, especially in relation to avoided grassland conversion, to realize. So you will see that there's a blip, and the blue would be the carbon offset. So that's approximately 10 million in terms of revenue that we're looking at. Now, the obvious question is the big bar around 2023. Why is that so big? Our projections basically indicate that that's when the first round of direct carbon accrual measurement offsets, the real big batch will realize. And also we estimate that the land that we will first measure and baseline would probably be the land from the producers that are doing the best work, that generally would sequester the most carbon. So we're estimating roughly 80 million in that year based on offsets alone. So the team, there's a lot of names on there. I'm going to highlight only a couple, and the one thing that I think to highlight here is Pachachaterrae has curated a team of world leaders, each in their field. Dr. Chris Nichols, for example, our chief scientist, is one of the top soil microbiologists. She travels to the UN Food and Agriculture Administration 2-3 times a year to go and address the UN on matters of soil health and soil carbon. Jeff Reading, one of the original 4 architects of the Alberta carbon market, and a pioneer in matters of clean tech, climate change, and has been doing this for the past 30 years before the general public even had an inkling of climate change. And then in summary, and I thought one last thing, what better way to do a summary than to quickly highlight a couple of the social impact benefits that Pachachaterrae would bring, because we've talked about the money, but why are we really doing all of this? This company is going to be very lucrative. I have no doubt about this. But I mean, it's in the end not all about the money. From an environmental standpoint, obvious thing is the amount of sequestration that can happen is tremendous. And the UNFAO actually estimates that if the world turns to a regenerative agriculture and the soil starts sequestering enough carbon, we could actually, by that method alone, solve the climate change problem before 2050. To the agricultural producers, higher carbon content in the soil leads to a number of benefits. Much higher production. So estimates are about 30% increase in production. Much reduced input cost. You're not buying fertilizer, pesticides, and herbicides anymore. The soil's water holding capacity goes up by up to about 27 times, which would lead to drought resistance, drought mitigation, flood mitigation, wildfire mitigation, and all of those benefits not only to those rural communities, but also benefits to the environment. Obviously, governments, benefits to them would primarily be, I would say, the fact that for the Canadian government, it's committed to report soil data to the under the Paris Convention. It doesn't have any way to do so. We hold the answer to provide that soil data to them to comply with their soil data and soil carbon reporting duties. To the emitters, we estimate that we will provide much larger buckets of offsets or packages or groups of offsets, numbers of offsets, than any other offset generator or aggregator in the country can do. So I think that that's probably a good summary. Thank you very much.